Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to Epic Comic Book Wednesday, a world's finest collaboration between Michael K. Vaughan and myself, where we talk about comics, whether it's a character or a run or a more philosophical subject. He gets to pick whatever we talk about per week, and I get the slightest of heads up in order to prepare myself. But today, it's a very interesting subject. It's not specific to any one comic book or creator. And it didn't require much in the way of preparation, although it did require a lot more thought than I expected. It's just a simple question. Why do we like comics? Why do we like them? Why do we read them? When Mike proposed that, I thought, well, surely that's easy. And then the more I thought about it, the more reasons came to mind, and the more I wondered, why have I loved this stuff? Why have I read this stuff forever? And loved it so much. Some of the reasons are not helpful, and they're not specific to comics because they're just personal. I read these things very early on, a long time ago, so there's an element of not only nostalgia but sunk cost. I spent a lot of time paging through these things and either getting rid of them or going to some pains to collect them, to keep them. Those days, fortunately, are over, largely because the electronic versions are so much better. They're so much easier, and they don't require enormous amounts of storage space, and they aren't a hassle to care for. And you don't have to worry about getting Cheetos in them instead, and you can pinch and zoom the artwork. But aside from that, that's an obvious reason, but aside from that, I was trying to figure out why. It's a good question. Why do these things hold appeal? And I honestly believe, again, there are other operative reasons that aren't very helpful. For me, one of those would be artwork. I came to love the sequential comic book style artwork. I came to love it not only through comics, but also through great comic strips. A lost thing that definitely dates me. Once upon a time, though, there were great comic strips that you just loved, and you wouldn't miss them, and you cared about how much work could be done in 3 panels during the week, and then in a big opulent spread on the weekend, in the Sunday funnies. I cut my teeth on Pogo and Lil Abner and Tarzan and Prince Valiant and Flash Gordon and things like that. I cut my teeth on those things and followed them right through their evolution, almost all the way to the present day, all the way through BC and Tumbleweeds and Doonesbury and Bloom County and of course Calvin and Hobbes, all the way down to, I think I probably said goodbye to my love of newspaper comics with the final Sunday strip of Calvin and Hobbes, where the creator of Calvin and Hobbes says goodbye to his characters. It's not, they're going to continue having adventures, but we're not going to see them anymore. I remember vividly reading that, getting to it in the Sunday paper that weekend, and maybe that was my saying goodbye in a way. I didn't need to, because a lot of the comics that I've mentioned continue on in some way or other. But I think that was probably my goodbye to newspaper comics, was the end of Calvin and Hobbes. But that was the goodbye, but that was decades and decades and decades after my introduction. And that helped a lot, I'm sure, to acclimate me to panel-by-panel sequential artwork. There is a way to learn how to at least understand that. Scott Adams wrote a great book called Understanding Comics that will show you how to understand panel-by-panel sequential artwork, but I don't think it's really possible to come to a full-blown love of that kind of thing unless it gets you early. And I could be wrong about that, but it definitely got me early. So comic books, on one, that's another answer to why I love them that isn't very helpful, because it's so personal, is that I was ready for reading that kind of thing because I already loved it. But another element of why I love comics that I think has a stronger claim now and that may be more general. It may be more applicable to, for instance, Mike's own answers, which I haven't seen, or any of yours if you read comics, is the reason why I automatically thought about this book. This is 80 Years of Superman in Action Comics, a deluxe edition. I took the dust jacket off it. That is a detail from the cover of Action Comics #1, where you have a costumed figure with a big red cape lifting a car over his head. And then you've got the front cover here with a grim Superman who does not have the spit curl. When I took it off, you get this as the naked hardcover. And these are just one cover after another of Action Comics, straight through the war years to later goofy Lois Lane trying to figure out that Superman and Clark Kent are the same person. There is Action Comics 500. And you eventually go to the Stan Lee era over at Marvel Comics, and that found its way into DC Comics, so all of a sudden Superman is getting the stuffing beaten out of him, or he is having personal crises or whatnot. And I think that those covers, and a volume like this that retrospects, takes you through Superman from the beginning all the way to what was the present day 20 years ago when this was made. I think that's another answer to why I love comics, which is that I have grown with them. I have followed the way they have changed over the course of a long, long time. All of my 28 years. I have watched them change from this sort of thing to this sort of thing. I have watched them do that. And I have been invested the whole time in decisions that were made, people that were hired, people that were fired, obvious ideological biases and whatnot. I have watched that whole time. It's only just comparatively recently. It's only since about the 20-teens, the mid-20-teens, that I stopped that I got rid of that habit and don't do it anymore. So that every week there is something at the LCS, the local comic shop, that I would spend money on. If there were a comic shop on my route, I would do that. And sometimes there is a comic shop on the route of friends, so I will make one request here or there. Like, for instance, today, Wednesday, is New Comic Book Day, and there is a facsimile reprint out today of Fantastic Four number 50, which will have the original artwork. It will have all of the original ads and letters and whatnot. It's an exact reprint of that issue. Marvel and DC Comics have taken to doing facsimile reprints of older issues of their back catalog as a way to sell books, because most of their current books don't sell at all, because they are terrible. But whatever the reason is, they don't tend to sell at all. The facsimile reprints do really well. They're at an astronomical price. They're at a price that most of the facsimile reprints that I buy on Wednesday, on New Comic Book Day, are facsimile reprints at $5 a piece of something that I bought for 25 cents. I bought Fantastic Four number 50 when it first came out. And so on and so forth. Most of them are like that. But for instance, that would be entertaining. That would be $5 worth of entertainment. If I were going out and about, if a comic shop were on my route, I would probably get that. And for instance, next week on New Comic Book Day, well, there's Titan Books has the current franchise to Conan the Barbarian. And they are doing a comic book called Conan the Barbarian, and they are also doing a magazine called The Savage Sword of Conan. And both of those come out next week, just by coincidence. They both show up on the same day. And the cover for Savage Sword of Conan number 9 is by the late, unfortunately, great Neil Adams. It's probably his last comic book cover. And it's terrific. I mean, honestly, you're obviously, if you're me, you're obviously going to get that, or ask somebody to get it. But otherwise, no. Little specialized things like that, sure. But otherwise, no, I don't anymore. But I did for a long, long time, and I think that is part of why I love comics, why I have loved them, because I've followed these stories. You become invested in stories. I hate to say it, it is a product of the Stan Lee virus. It isn't a thing you used to do. It used to be that you weren't invested in Superman's stories and his continuity. You just liked him. That's all. You weren't trying to remember the last time he fought Terra Man or the Galactic Golem because he wasn't going to remember. He knew the person. He knew who Lex Luthor was, but he wasn't going to remember, oh, the last time we met, you traumatized me. No, there wasn't going to be anything of that. But even there, you would, even before the Stan Lee virus took over, you would still think about a character. You would think about the real superheroes. I mean, Wonder Woman or Batman or Superboy. You would see something like that, and you would realize, oh, okay, so Captain Marvel is fighting Ibak. Okay, well, I've read some terrific adventures where he fights Ibak, so I bet this will be terrific. You didn't have to remember every little detail because the story wasn't going to remember them, but you were still invested. And then Marvel Comics style continuity came along, and suddenly you were hyper invested in knowing the details, in knowing the past continuity of every little thing. That has its appeal. That is basic storytelling. When Mike originally proposed the idea, I got some highfalutin nonsense in my head of talking about modern day mythology. But really, I think it's just storytelling. It's just that you become invested in wanting to know what happens to these characters next. What will, in the current idea of superhero comics, what will push the boundaries of what will the team fail? Will it break apart? Will it be betrayed? Etc. Etc. All these. Hi, baby. How's the little baby? How's the little baby? Oh. Want to come down here? I'm going to give them some free activity in every video. Do you want to come down here? Come on down here. There you go. Oh, what are you going to do? Huh? You got a choice. You're either going to stay with me or you're going to go over to your chair. Oh, no, it's the third row. She jumped down on the floor. Or, well, anyway, that means she wants to do something and I should obey. But I've said my piece anyway. I honestly think that is the reason. Aside from the purely personal stuff, the nostalgia, and also I love, once you attune yourself to what artists can do in this medium, you can come to really love it, and I do. But I think the broader point for me is that I'm invested, or I was for a long time. It was hard letting that go, but and I don't foresee it coming back. You would need to fire everyone involved, all of them, everyone, right down to the kid who sweeps the floor at night. They all have to go because they all want to improve me. They don't want to entertain me anymore. They want to improve me. I'm horrible. They're okay taking my money, but they really want to disinfect it first. I'm horrible. And what they really want to do, I get up every morning, I just want to educate you. This 20-year-old. What they really want to do is improve me. And I obviously have nothing but scorn and hatred for that kind of ideology, and that is firmly taken over Marvel and DC Comics. So I'm not interested in that, so I don't do it anymore. But I am still... I guess that element as an active element is gone, so it has been overrun by nostalgia. I never miss a reprint volume, or reviewing things on the tablet, just going back in whole runs of things. But for a long time, for the bulk of my comic book collecting, that was, I think, the main element, is that I was invested. So if there's a new issue of the Teen Titans, I want to read it because I've followed these characters all this time. I think that might be it. I don't know, but that's my guess anyway. We'll see what Michael K. Vaughan does. I will leave a link to his video as soon as it goes up. I'd love to hear if you read comic books. I'm assuming the two of you who watch this video are the reason you watch is because you do. If you read comics, I'd love to know what first comes to mind for your own reasons for doing so. I think it's a fascinating question. I would never have thought of it, but it's a fascinating question. So those are my answers. I will wrap this up for now, and I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.